Supporters and opponents of Arizona's controversial immigration law have a lot to say about Monday's Supreme Court ruling. The High Court issued a mixed bag in its decision, striking down 3 of the law's 4 key provisions, but leaving intact the most controversial part. John Jessup has more on the reaction.
Reaction to the ruling was split, just as it was for the justices, disappointing both supporters and opponents.
This is a dark day for civil rights in America.
The High Court struck down 3 provisions of the Arizona law, but left intact the so-called show me your papers provision, allowing police to check the legal status of anyone they pull over.
We have to stop following Arizona's footsteps of pursuing policies based on hatred and fear.
At issue, whether state immigration laws infringe on what's traditionally seen as a federal prerogative. The court said it is fundamental that foreign countries concerned about the status, safety, and security of their nationals in the United States must be able to confer and communicate on the subject with one national sovereign, not the 50 separate states. Supporters of Arizona's law say the ruling does nothing to address America's broken immigration system.
Now the state of Arizona and all 50 states are at the mercy of the federal government as to which aspects of federal law this president decides he's going to enforce on any given day, which I guess in part will determine how close we are to the election and how much he thinks he needs certain votes.
In a dissenting opinion, Justice Scalia wrote, Arizona moved to protect its sovereignty not in contradiction of federal law, but in complete compliance with it. If securing its territory in this fashion is not within the power of Arizona, we should cease referring to it as a sovereign state. Arizona Congressman Raul Grijalva said he believes the law and the ruling further divides Americans.
Whether we agree or disagree, we're all tied together by one blanket, and it's torn at that social fabric.
Ultimately, the court's decision puts the debate squarely back on Washington to once and for all come up with a solution.
No one believes that comprehensive immigration reform is going to happen in this Congress, but I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that something might be able to get done in the next Congress. It needs to happen.
The court's ruling doesn't necessarily settle all matters related to the case. There are still political and legal challenges to Section 2B, the so-called show me your papers provision. And Justice Kennedy acknowledged uncertainty with how the law will be interpreted and applied, suggesting that the case will probably work its way back through the courts and constitutional challenges. John Jessup, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
And for more now on the ruling, we turn to Jordan Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice. Jordan, Arizona's governor is calling this ruling a victory. Would you agree?
I do think it's a victory. It's interesting, out of the 4 provisions, the one provision that stands at the Supreme Court is the most controversial, the provision that everybody's been talking about since Arizona and other states started to follow in Arizona's footsteps, the show me your papers provision. This is a provision that requires, it tells the police that they must, they shall, not they might, but they shall check the papers of people if they have reasonable suspicion that they're in Arizona, that they're in the country illegally. The fact that this provision stood, I think, shows you why there is so much confusion with the immigration laws and immigration enforcement laws in our country, and why you'll see so much reaction of people saying, no, this is a bad day, this is a good day. It's really, it depends on how you look at it. Of course, this isn't a full victory for Arizona, but I do think it does give states at least a model of what they can do to further secure themselves, try to further secure their own borders and their people.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. How will the ruling affect Arizona and the other states that have passed laws on the crackdown of illegal immigration?
Well, Justice Kennedy kind of walked through in the majority opinion how 2B works, how you can use that provision and how states should operate in that provision. But there is a problem already arising. You've got the Obama administration. The Department of Justice yesterday has put out a phone number and email address for SB 1070 for people to report supposed civil rights violations if they feel that they're being racially profiled. So this is becoming very political as well, kind of playing around with national security. So the DOJ has got this email address and phone number you can call now if you think you've been harassed because of your race in Arizona, targeting police. And the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also under the Obama administration, has said that they're no longer going to cooperate with Arizona when they call about illegal immigrants.
So, Jordan, what are border states supposed to do now if the federal government will not protect them from being overrun with illegal immigrants?
You know, Justice Scalia had said if this is the way the founding fathers and the framers of the Constitution knew that the government would operate, that the president could decide the immigration laws, that states really had no power, they would have rushed to the exits in Philadelphia during the Constitution ratification convention. I think what we have to understand is that states now are at a serious disadvantage about protecting their borders. The Supreme Court has basically said they have very little power whatsoever to deal with illegal immigration. That's why you saw such a strong dissent from Justice Scalia. But I think, listen, if we care about the security of the people, whether it's the state or federal government doing its job, what we see now is that if the states aren't even allowed to try for the most part, then the burden falls on the federal government, which means it falls on the President of the United States to secure the people and secure the border.
Well, Jordan, we've got about 30 seconds now. The president recently announced his administration will no longer deport certain children of illegal immigrants. Does he have the authority to do that?
You know, this is a constitutional question we're actually looking at very closely right now. When this came out, I had started talking about working on it. I really do believe that this is questionable because it's not though the president and his administration have said, well, this is really something to prioritize and this is a discretionary act. This was another mandate. This president especially, loves mandates. And it basically tells judges, tells prosecutors, tells the government how you have to treat a certain class of people created not by legislation, but by the president's own policy. And I think it is very questionable whether or not it's legal at all. And that played into the Supreme Court's decision yesterday in Justice Scalia's dissent.
Indeed. Jordan Sekulow, the American Center for Law and Justice, as always, thank you.
Thank you.